All right, we are back again. We were having some technical issues, some technical difficulties with our live feed there just a minute ago. Nobody's back on just yet, but we will see. Tell me if you can see me. Tell me if you can hear me. We had to end the live feed just a minute ago and restart. We were having some technical issues that I have no idea what they were caused. I assume it was Facebook. Just drop a comment in the comment section and let me know if you can see and hear. And once we know that we are past those issues, the technical difficulties that we were experiencing there momentarily, we will jump back into the report. Tyler says all good. Everybody says good. Okay, well, good deal. We're going to try to go to Mr. Blair again. There we go. How you doing, Mr. Blair?
I'm doing good. How are you, Josh?
Can
All
you
loud and clear now, finally. Yeah,
Good
can you
deal.
hear me?
Yeah, sometimes Facebook. Yeah, I can hear you. There's a little bit of delay, but I don't think there's any echo on. But yeah, sometimes Facebook Live, it's the best way to disseminate this information. It's the easiest way to reach a lot of people simultaneously. But sometimes the technical difficulties of going live on Facebook can kind of be a hindrance. But yeah, we're glad that you joined us tonight. And before we kind of dive into the rut and actually talk about your report and what you're seeing, tell us a little bit about who you are and explain your affiliation with Realtree 365.
Great. Thanks. First, thanks for having me, Josh. So I'm from North Alabama. And when I started, I guess.
I think we lost you there, Blair. I am going to disconnect.
You got me?
I think we're it's in and out.
Can you hear me now?
You're a little better now. Yeah, we're a little better now.
Good. No? Hey, no.
It's in and out pretty heavy there, but let's see. Everybody let us know in the comments. We'll see us and hear us. We're still having a little bit of issue.
Can't see any comments. I'm probably illiterate with this stuff.
No worries. I'm catching. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your affiliation with Realtree 365.
So actually, Bart and I started, and two other guys, Bart and I, and then Joe Schultz and Doug Hampton. We started actually this year with Real Show. Fun, learning a lot, and I think, all the other guys, Realtree headquarters are in. It's going to be a fun show.
I hate to interrupt you, but we're losing. We're losing. You're in and out pretty heavy. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect you for now, and then we'll try to invite you back on here momentarily. Maybe if you can try a different connection or something. But I'm going to go to our Northeast reporter, and then I'm going to try to get you back on as soon as we get him. Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, we're going to see if we can get. Maybe we're going to jump back into this here. Sorry. Hold on one second. We're having a lot of technical issues tonight. We've been pretty blessed so far this year. We've not had any kind of technical difficulties at all for our first 5 reports. And then here tonight, right here at the peak of the rut, she'd go haywire on us, but that's all right. We'll keep trying. Let's see here. David asked, anyone seeing any rut action in Eastern Kentucky? Eastern Kentucky is much the same as the rest of Kentucky. You see a peak breeding date around November 15th with a range anywhere from November 10th to the 20th. That's going to be pretty much the norm for anybody in Kentucky. Yeah, sorry guys. Sorry about the connection there. Sometimes we deal with that, and no fault of anyone there. It's just sometimes we have some technical difficulties, and we have to try again. Let's see here. I still cannot send an invite to our Northeast reporter. I may have to get him on later. We're going to call an audible tonight, and I'm going to try to send Mr. Patrick Mayteen an invite, and then we'll do the Northwest and Southwest first. Again, we have to shake things up sometimes when people are having issues. Hey, Patrick, how are you? Sorry,
Good.
we're having a thing.
I'm connected well.
Yeah, you're in good shape, man. It's just we're having issues in the Northeast, Midwest, and Southeast tonight. You have the best service.
I'm usually the problem.
Yeah. Let's jump right into it. Tell us what's happening up there in the Northwest.
Are we good?
You're back with us.
All right. Excellent. So what a difference a week makes. Last week I was really starting to wonder what was going on. I wasn't finding any scrapes. I wasn't really seeing as many rubs as I thought I ought to be by now. But we had some snow. We have real winter now. I woke up to about 12 degrees this morning, so it's really cooled down. If we'd done this 2 nights ago, I wouldn't even be able to be out here. I mean, we had horizontal snow blowing under my shed here, so it was crazy, but really sparked some good movement. Guys up in Washington are telling me that they've definitely seen an increase in movement with like the 3.5-year-old bucks, and during daylight. I should stress that. Still a couple of weeks out, before they really get kicked off up there, but the 4.5, 5.5+ year-old bucks are still pretty nocturnal right now, and those guys can bait. So I mean, they've got trail cameras on feeders and baits and pretty heavy bait stations they've had out for months. So starting to pick up a few new bucks, but not really as much movement as I'm observing here in Idaho. Talked to my buddy Dieter Booth. I hope I'm saying that right. He's a Bowtech rep, and he's seen some bucks that are tickling antlers, and he said the interesting part about that kind of surprised me, but I believe him that he said that some of this antler tickling that he's seeing with the younger bucks, sorting out pecking orders, he said it's attracting other deer. 3.5-year-old bucks running over to have a look. So, definitely starting to happen here. And today, I mean, I checked some cameras right around the house here yesterday. Didn't find much. Again, no scrapes. A few more rubs than I was seeing, but no scrapes yet. Kind of starting to wonder what was going on. I went up to my higher elevation stuff today and covered quite a bit of ground, found my first scrapes, and not just little aggression displacement scrapes. I mean, real live scrapes in spots where normally the big signboard stuff is, where, I keep looking because they're always there every year. Had a couple cameras on those spots already, even though the scrapes hadn't appeared yet. They usually do. So those are some of my stand spots, and had some cameras on those spots. Some of the scrapes just in a week went from nothing to trash can lid size. Lots of broken off branches, very aggressive stuff. Quite a few 3.5-year-old bucks starting to come out in broad daylight. I mean, even had some trail cam photos at 10:30, 12 o'clock, middle of day. But like I said, it's been cool. I mean, it got up to like 33 today. So it was been pretty cold the last few days. It really has helped. The other exciting thing, checking cameras today, is I have 2 or 3 completely new bucks that I have never seen before. I mean, cameras that have been there since August. I know 2 bucks for sure. one really dandy buck that I have never seen before, ever, not once. And he didn't just come through and disappear. He's been on a couple of spots pretty regular. So that's very encouraging too. So, looking at the weather, it looks like it's gonna warm slightly. I don't know that that's going to really slow down the action that's been sparked off now. It could slow things down, as far as daylight movement a little bit, but I think they're still going to hug the edges of the day. Like I said, if a guy is not super particular, I mean, some of those 3.5-year-old bucks I had on camera in broad daylight are pretty decent bucks to a lot of guys. So this weekend's definitely going to be worthwhile. Rifle hunters, get out there and class some sunny hillsides. If you're a stand hunter, getting a stand, it's definitely worthwhile. Of course, the rut is definitely not going yet, but definitely some good movement. And Washington Washington doesn't have anything open right now that I know of. Maybe some rifle seasons in a couple of units, but Idaho's wide open for the next month. So if I wouldn't be hesitant to jump in a stand this weekend. It's starting to happen. Now moving over to Montana, I talked to Mike Ellig. He has black gold sights, and he's starting to see more scrapes. He says quite a few bit more scrapes, but he suspects that they're being made by younger bucks at this point. The bachelor groups are just breaking up, he says, and so he expects the rut to really kick off any time now. Usually he says about 1st of November, usually really get going. And, like up here in Washington and Idaho, they have a pretty wham bam rut. I mean, it starts and ends within 2 or 3 weeks. So, which is a good thing if you have time to be in the woods. I talked to another buddy he lives in the Hamilton area, Thomas Tabor, good, nice guy, outdoor rider. He said that he's seen a little bit of lip curling, a little bit of sparring with the younger bucks. He said the bigger bucks are still kind of hanging out together and off to the side by themselves. But, definitely starting to happen. He's seen some younger bucks nosing at does, but nothing really serious yet. Moving down to Wyoming, much better news down there as far as rut goes. Talked to a buddy of mine, Chris Madsen, and he lives in Sheridan, Wyoming. He drives back and forth between the Bighorn River and Montana and Sheridan area a lot. That he's seeing a lot more deer out in the middle of the day, out during daylight. Definitely said that he's seeing some pre-rut activity, a lot of daytime movement. So very encouraging there. And then talking to Dustin DeCrew, who has Bighorn Outfitters down in Buffalo, Wyoming, and he kind of seconds all of those observations. He says the rut activity is really picking up noticeably. He said scrapes are super hot right now. Sounds like they're a little bit ahead of everyone else down there in central Wyoming than we are up here. Bucks are definitely disbanding, splitting up, and he and his guides are seeing a lot of daytime movement from mature bucks, from sure enough big bucks moving throughout the day. So if you're in Wyoming, you definitely want to be in a stand this weekend. It is happening. So you've got, the next couple of weeks, it's going to be pretty hot down there in Wyoming. Probably Montana is going to kick off this weekend. Could be some of the best days for some of that light sparring type rattling and little grunting, doe bleats, that sort of stuff. That when they're establishing those pecking orders and breaking up those bachelor groups, I've had really good luck rattling. And I don't mean like crashing antlers like you might do in South Texas during the rut, but just kind of that tickling, light rattling, a little bash here and there to grab their attention. But I've had really good luck during that pre-rut stage, calling bucks, nice bucks in too. And but Washington, Idaho, I'd say we've got 2 weeks until we really get hot, but things are definitely starting. Montana's definitely starting. Wyoming already has started. So going to be a good weekend. And it looks like Washington, Idaho, like I said, weather-wise, it's going to warm up a tad, but I mean, it's not going to warm up to like in the 60s or 70s. It's going to be in the highs of the 40s and 50s instead of like the 30s today. Montana, pretty much the same thing. Wyoming's supposed to cool off as well. So it's going to be a great weekend in the Northwest.
Good deal. I'm going to interrupt you just momentarily. We got a question that come in, from Chris. Thoughts on South Georgia, specifically Atkinson County. Historically in Atkinson County there, and historically and based on what we're seeing right now, real time, that part of Georgia typically sees a peak rut fall somewhere in late October. Generally the last 4, 5, 6 days of October is usually when that part of Georgia sees a peak rut, but it can also see a peak rut as late as early November. So that's kind of what the historical data suggests, Chris, for Atkinson County, Georgia. I hope that answers your question. Let's see here. Let's dive into the comments here momentarily. I don't think I see. Kyle says, what about Southern Ohio leaving tomorrow for 10 days? Southern Ohio should be really good for the next week or week and a half. That part of Ohio and all of Ohio for that matter, is going to see a really good temperature drop between tomorrow and Friday, and it's going to set the stage for some really, really good deer hunting for November 1st through at least November 10th. I can't see past the 10-day forecast, but it's really shaping up to be a good spell in the deer woods for Ohio deer hunters. Let's see if we got any other questions here before I jump back to you. I think Patrick sees a deer. Stacy says, starting to see bucks on trail camera on state land in southern Michigan, but nothing during the day yet. Hoping to see some soon. Really nothing major as far as scrapes or rubs quite yet. Saw a few, but not anything crazy. All right, back to you on the mountain, Mr. Mayteen. What are you seeing?
There is a mature buck about 100 yards from my back porch. So probably about a 3.5.
Is he rubbing it free?
3.5 year old.
Straight, breeding a doe, eating clover? What are you doing?
He's out there eating some of my clover, but he's not very concerned about me. That's hilarious. But like I said, yeah, that 3.5-year-old bucks are starting to move, and there's evidence right there. So it's still legal shooting hours here. Barely, but
go get your weapon. No, for that part of the world, tactic wise, for the deer hunter that's going into the weekend here in a day or so, what is your advice to all the deer hunters up there in the Northwest region? What should they do tactically speaking?
Well, if you're rifle hunting, you're going to approach things a lot differently than a bow hunter, obviously. But if I were rifle hunting this weekend, I would start. Normally, I should preface the whole thing by normally the clear cuts, that sort of thing, are going to be kind of avoided until the rut starts, because it's just it's the death zone. You step foot out there, they get shot at. So it's going to be a good weekend to get on advantage, start glassing the edges of those clear cuts. Those bucks the does will go out in those clear cuts. They don't get shot at like the bucks do, but those bucks will start cruising the edges of those clear cuts, downwind of those clear cuts, scent checking does and starting to make their scrapes, and just kind of getting into the whole rut mood, checking things out. If you can get on advantage and get opposite of a canyon of a brushy hillside that has a lot of openings, if I rifle hunting, I wouldn't advise like just going out and tromping through the woods. I'd get up on a vantage and glass. That's how I've done really well finding deer here for buddies rifle hunting. Bow hunting, obviously this pretty hard. You're going to have a hard time stalking deer right now. They're not that distracted yet, but what I've always had really good luck with, especially if you get a weekend where there's a lot of guys in the woods, tromping around and shooting a lot, is I tend to find little openings. I call them staging areas. Little openings or little meadows inside of heavy cover. And I mean, you have to fight your way into some of these spots. And that's where a lot of my tree stand sites are. Especially if that's on a saddle or a ridge point or a little bench or something where they can get on some flat ground and make some scrapes and rubs. And the you know, a good weekend too, if you do want to cover some ground, if you just feel like you need to hike, is just do some scouting, run around and see if you can find some scrapes and rubs along the edge of some of the old logging roads, on ridge points, saddles. Those benches where the little openings are on the benches in thick cover. That's as a bow hunter in this part of the woods, up in these big woods, big mountains, really dependent on scrapes for success. There's just everywhere is a bedding area, everywhere is a feeding area here. So there's not that real defined stuff like you have in the Midwest and farm country. So really important to find those scrapes, especially if you're bow hunting and going to sit in a tree stand. And you're only going to do that by covering a lot of ground. And right now is a good time to do that as those scrapes are opening up. So you know, the rut's not in full swing, and it's a good time to get out there and find those scrapes. What I usually do is I take off with a backpack, with a day pack full of trail cameras and screw-in steps and a saw. And when I find a real hot spot where there's a couple of scrapes or just a lot of sign, a lot of does is always good. I'll trim out a tree and install some steps, just make that spot available if I need it. Some of those spots I never use, but they're available if I need them. And then, you know, set some trail cameras on scrapes and see if it's the kind of buck that you're looking for.
Good deal. You know, solid information. Excuse me, guys. I'm still dealing with this sinus infection, so my voice is kind of coming and going. But yeah, solid information, very good information for all of our Northwestern deer hunters. I'll tell you, let's transition to the Southwest region. I know there's quite a few people that's asking about Texas and Oklahoma specifically. Let's start there.
All right, Texas. Talk to my good buddy Stephen Tisdale. We've been hunting together about 30 years. Good guy, good, super good bow hunter. I'll be down there visiting him in December. And he's got a couple of really good tracking dogs, and he's been spending a lot of time. He volunteers his time. Like I said, he's a good guy. He volunteers his time to go help people track wounded deer. So he's been doing a lot of driving all over West Texas, and so he's been seeing a lot of solo lone bucks out cruising in broad daylight. So you know, the rut is definitely, it's in the pre-rut stage there. Those bucks are out cruising. He said he did get to sit a feeder this weekend. He said the bucks that came in, he said they are not tolerating each other at all. Doing a lot of grunting at each other, you know, back off, get away from me. And so he from his experience over the years in that part of the world, he said this coming weekend is going to be prime time to get out and do some rattling. He gets out into some of the thicker, on the edges of some of that thicker blueberry juniper and creek beds and stuff, and does a lot of rattling this time of year. Has a lot of success calling in bucks. I hunted with him when I lived down in New Mexico, a little bit closer, and could just run over there real quick. I remember one 3-day period, we called in 13 mature bucks in 3 days. It's a riot. It's fun. Now that's up in West Texas and kind of the northern part of West Texas. Now, talking to Ronnie Parsons, another really super good bow hunter. He's down in the San Angelo area, more towards it, kind of, I would call it the northern edge of the hill country. So it's still really not much going on down there. He said there are some bucks that are just kind of checking feeders, coming in, not eating, not staying very long, but not really, and most of that at night. But he hasn't really seen much evidence that the rut's getting going down there. So the acorns are still a factor down there. Deer hanging out in the big acorn mottes, the live oaks, and not coming into the feeders as much. Also talked to a friend of mine, outdoor writer, Catherine Ainsworth, and she was down in the San Angelo area this week, and said that she saw some younger bucks that are starting to chase and act kind of ruddy, but you know, kind of posturing with one another. But the bigger bucks they saw were they were coming into corn, but they weren't really interested in the does or anything like that. Now moving way down south, talked to Mike Stroff. He's a Realtree Pro staffer and has a Savage Outdoors TV show, also a couple of outfitting businesses down in that part of the world. And so it's been very unpredictable. He's in the kind of the southern part of the hill country, and then he has another lease or ranch down in southwest, northern part of South Texas proper. So it's very unpredictable. He said one day you're covered up with deer, the next day nothing, and it's pretty much the same news as last year. So things really haven't gotten started down there at all. So haven't heard from my guy in East Texas the last couple of weeks. They must be off hunting somewhere. So I know that last time I talked to him, the acorns were really falling hard, and that had become a factor. So for the guys in Oklahoma, talk to Jeff Danker and Daniel McVeigh. They have the Buck Ventures TV. They hunt up in northwest Oklahoma. So they say scrapes and rubs are really going big time now, starting to appear left and right. Haven't noticed any interest in does yet, but they are seeing a lot of daytime movement. And Eddie Claypool over in northeastern Oklahoma kind of seconds that, says seen a lot of movement. He said he hit a buck a couple days ago. They're starting to move big time, and he predicts that this weekend is going to be fantastic. He says they should be running hard this weekend. He'd definitely be in a stand.
We've had several people.
Again, same news.
I hate to interrupt, but we've had several people. To your point, in East Texas, we've had several comments in the comment section saying that there's quite a bit of chasing activity going on in that region of the state right now. So it backs up, and even though you weren't able to contact your East Texas guy, we've had quite a few reports. So, and again, that's a big part of this report. Everybody, okay, you're part of it too. We kind of share the information that you give us. And before we dive into the rest of the Southwest report, we have a few people here who have some reports of their own. Wes McKee says Ohio should be super hot from Friday on, plus or minus, or give it, within the next 2 weeks especially, but definitely the next 10 days. He says that there's another cold front that's going to be coming. It's going to be hitting a lot of states throughout the Midwest and Northeast and Southeast. He said he had an active buck moving of a morning last weekend. He's also had quite a few 3-year-olds bumping does around food plots. Thanks for that comment. Let's see here.
Let me interrupt one second. While you're doing that, I'm going to run and grab a charge cord. I've gone from 80% to 15% in like 1 hour. So go ahead and I'll grab a charge cord.
Al, we'll come back to you here in a moment. We'll basically ask your question to Patrick when he's able to return. Let's see here. Sean asks, what's the best scent to put on a scrape? We'll see here. First off, make sure you're in a state where you can legally put out scents. That's definitely something you want to check if you haven't already. But some states will allow natural urine. Some states will allow both natural and other types, synthetics. And in some states just allow synthetics, and then some states don't let any type of deer urine, to be put out. So check your regulations first. But my preference when it comes to scrapes and putting cameras on scrapes and trying to take inventory over scrapes, I prefer to use a buck urine in those scrapes. I'm not as big on doe urine. I'm not big on estrus at all for scrapes and mock scrapes. Definitely my preference is going to be buck urine if you are trying to establish a mock scrape or trying to freshen up an existing one. Let's see here. Rusty Black says still 1 week out there in Pennsylvania, Montgomery County. Bucks are definitely ramping up big time though. Brett says seeing small bucks cruising, but the big guys are still nocturnal, not moving much in daytime or in Indiana. Let's see here if we got any more reports. Patrick asks, what's it mean when you find a lot of rubs clustered in one small area? That means you're pretty much right there close to that deer's core area, more or less. Generally, when you find a ton of rubs clustered in one little spot, you may even be in his bed, in his bedding area. If you find that many clustered all together, because a lot of times, at least sometimes, when a deer has his preferred bedding locations, there's generally going to be at least one, if not more. A lot of times there's 4 or 5 clustered rubs around his bedding area, and there'll be one pretty much right in his, excuse me, not just his bedding area, but his actual bed. So if you find that many rubs clustered in one area, now if it's on the edge of a field, it's probably not as bad. But if you found that back in the timber or within cover, you're probably really, really close to a deer's bed. So definitely good whenever you find that type of rut sign clustered up. Let's see here. I think that's about all of our reports and questions. We had one question for you, Patrick, and I'm going to scroll back up to that. Hold on one moment. Let's see here. Hal says, how about North Texas? Texas Parks and Wildlife says the peak is around November 15th. We are finding scrapes and rubs. Young bucks are on camera during the day. What's your advice to him? He says that, again, that it typically happens around mid-November. What's your advice for Mr. Prater?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. And I actually forgot about that. I talked to my buddy Dwayne Purse, who lives up in north central Texas, and so definitely seeing a lot more deer, off the road while he's out doing his farm work. A lot of those 3.5-year-old bucks out right now. He said on their feeders on the cameras, the mature bucks are still fairly nocturnal right now, but the things are starting to trickle in up there. Lots of movement with the 3.5-year-old bucks, and there could be some of those 4.5, some of those 3.5, 4.5-year-old bucks up in that part of Texas. There's some really good genetics in northern Texas. I mean, some of those bucks can be pretty good scoring bucks. So not anything to dismiss out of hand. But yeah, I'd say about the 15th of November would be pretty accurate up there. But I've always had more luck during those pre-rut days, which the next couple of weeks, as I have during the peak. Sometimes the peak gets kind of tough because it just gets pretty crazy. You just anything you've patterned is out the window. You just have bucks coming and going, and sometimes they go into like really a lockdown phase where they're not moving much at all. So I don't get too wrapped up in the peak of the rut. It's this pre-rut I really think is more productive in a lot of ways. Calls work much better a lot of times, and the deer are cruising more and not quite as they're more predictable right now.
Good deal. Gail says they agree with the mid-November for most of that region. And it kind of transitions, as you move southward, it kind of creeps a little bit closer to Thanksgiving, so we appreciate everybody's report and information. Benjamin, we aren't quite to the Midwest report tonight. We've been having some issues with our Northeast reporter, Midwest reporter, as well as our Realtree 365 guests. Facebook Live's been pretty glitchy tonight for some reason and not been letting us add people. I'm not sure why that is. And when we were able to add them, it was a bad connection. So, just to answer your question, if we aren't able to answer it from one of our other reporters, all of Missouri, with the exception of maybe those that are along the Ozarks, but even there, most of the region, most of the state is going to see a peak rut around November 15th, with a window between November 10th and 20th. Let's see here. All right, I think that's all of our comments and questions. Tactically speaking, and again, it's going to be a wide array of answers for Texas, but just looking to Oklahoma and the other areas there in the Southwest, not the Coos country, but whitetail country there in the Southwest, what would you advise deer hunters to do this weekend?
I would,
excuse me.
I would be in a stand for sure, but I would definitely be working some of those more social calls, the antler tickling, and I mean, if you start seeing really quick aggressive responses, you might get more aggressive with the rattling. But the grunting is gonna pull bucks. I mean, if you see a buck walking out of range, try grunting at him. I pulled a lot of deer 300 yards. Their deer are definitely going to be sorting out their pecking orders right now. So that's why that rattling, that antler tickling, and not getting after it and crashing the horns as hard as you can. Just normal, like try to imagine two bucks are just shoving each other around and without trying to kill each other. And that's the kind of rattling you want to imitate. I always equate it to a bunch of teenage boys kind of punching each other in the shoulder. I mean, they don't mean to hurt each other. They're just figuring out who's the toughest or who can be picked on and who can't, So it's kind of the same with the rattling, but the grunt calls definitely have a grunt call handy. And the doe bleats too. I've had really good luck with the bleats, just pulling the buck off of a trajectory that's going to be out of range. I've been able to pull them over pretty well. But, like my buddy Steven, they may be a little bit ahead of some of the rest of Texas because he's up on that Caprock country. It's a little higher altitude. I mean, higher altitude being like 3,500 foot instead of, 1,000 or lower. So they seem to be a little earlier than some of the other areas of the state. I know out there where my buddy Dwayne is in North Central. I mean, that's lower altitude down there. It's probably much warmer, but relative, So, it's East Texas, North Central, Southern Texas in particular. Things really may not have gotten kicked off yet, but West Texas all the way down into the northern hill country, I mean, things are definitely going to start picking up. And then up in the Panhandle too, they're probably already started. It's more, you get way up there, North Amarillo. I mean, that's more like Eastern Plains of Colorado up there. So I'm sure they're rocking and rolling up there already. Good movement and responding to antlers really well. Again, I always kind of think like a bow hunter. If I'm a rifle hunter, I'm gonna rifle season's gonna open on the 1st of November in Texas. I would get up on some high points and do some glancing. Those bucks are really cruising a lot. I know Texas hunters tend to get kind of anchored down to their feeders. And, if you find your feeders are getting hit at night, your trail cameras will tell you that. If they're getting hit at night or you're just not getting a lot of action on the feeders, don't be afraid to get out and climb a hill and glass some creek bottoms and stuff and see if you can catch one of those cruising bucks.
Good deal. Got a couple of questions that's rolled in here. I'll toss this question to you. How many times should you try to call a buck if you see one? How much is too much calling? If you see a deer out there in the field and you're trying to call to him, what's your advice for Stacy?
That's kind of a tricky one because you've kind of got to let him tell you how to proceed. I know that most of the bucks I've successfully called off of a bad trajectory, you hit them with a call, they pause, they look at you. I kind of, especially with antlers, I'm really hesitant to call while they're looking at me, but they're really good at picking up movement. But they'll pause, stop, look, and then I just sit there poised, wait until they turn their head back and start again, and then I hit them with another call. And that's usually when, if they're gonna take the bait, they'll start moving in. But a lot of times they're gonna come about halfway or come a little ways and stop and look and wait. And if you think you can get it, if you're inside of a box blind or something where they're not going to see you move, or you have good cover in your stand, you can hit them with some calls again. But you do have to be careful when they're looking at you. You can blow things in a hurry. But it's kind of like calling turkeys. If they're responding well to your calls, keep hitting them with it. If they're getting a little hesitant or you want to back off. So, and if you try some aggressive grunting, and they stop and pause, they look, they start walking, you hit them with a grunt again, and he just kind of ignores you. I mean, maybe try a doughboy, you know, mix things up a little bit. So, but I am a huge believer in deer call. I've called in a lot of deer with calls. I used to think it was silly long time ago, 20 years ago, but I really gotten to where I depend on them a lot, especially when deer are passing out of range. And I'm always going to hit them with a call. And again, I start with those social calls. You have nothing to lose. And, you know, when the rut starts, I'll hit them with the more aggressive stuff, but kind of have to take their temperature. Hit them with the soft stuff. And if they're not responding, hit them with the harder stuff. If they run off, you know, I obviously don't want to hit the next buck with that aggressive stuff if it put a buck off. So kind of have to let them tell you what to do.
All right. Is there any other advice you can share with our Southwestern deer hunters this week?
Well, we were talking about mock scrapes. I mean, you were talking about buck urine. I just usually use the stuff that's labeled scrape juice or whatever. You know, I've had really good luck with that. Also, wrapping up Oklahoma, talked to Joni Sandiford. They have the Croton Creek Ranch and outfitting, and they're seeing some young bucks chasing already in western Oklahoma. Bachelor groups are breaking up, and they're seeing some neck swelling, so it's going to blast off there as well pretty quickly. So
good deal. Good deal. Well, I appreciate you joining us and doing so a little bit earlier tonight. Even though it's probably not that much earlier because of the technical difficulties we had earlier with multiple people, but we appreciate you joining us, and we'll definitely look forward to having you on and getting your report next week.
All right. Well, good luck. I hope the rest of it goes well.
We're going to try. You know, sometimes things happen, but you know, it's not for a lack of effort. We got, you know, we're working for you guys. We're trying hard, but sometimes things don't go smooth. It's went really, really smooth up until this report tonight. And of course, I'm sick as a dog, and we've had a whole lot of technical issues. But the reports went pretty smooth, other than tonight. But yeah, we'll try to keep it rolling in your absence here in a moment. Thank you. All right, good deal. So we had Mr. Mayteen. He jumped on there and gave us a solid report. You know, we're having a lot of issues, not able to get the Midwest reporter on tonight. Apparently he is in the middle of a storm up there right now, and he is not being able to, he's just not getting a good connection. So we may not be able to add him. And the same thing is occurring apparently for our Northeastern reporter. Good news is, if we can't get those guys on, I have their reports, so I can give you their reports. And I actually have a lot of my own personal information for the Midwest region as well that I can share with you guys. In the meantime, we are going to try to go back to Mr. Goins. He is back with us. We're going to try him again. I hope he's got a better connection. But while we give him just a moment to get ready, I'm going to jump back into the comments. I see that you're there, Josh, but I'm not able to add you for some reason. I'm not sure why. I'm just not able to send you guys an invite, either to Tyler, our Midwest reporter, or to Josh, our Northeastern guy. Maybe have something to do with the storm up there. I'm not sure, but I'm not able to send you an invite. Maybe a connection issue. Rusty's advice is, whenever it comes to calling in response to Stacy, it says if he's inside 100 yards, tone your volume way down so you don't spook him. Solid advice. We're going to try to go to Mr. Blair and see if we can get him to join us. Hopefully we got a little better connection this time. Coming at you now, Mr. Blair. How you doing?
Is this any better?
How are you, brother?
Yay! Hey, I'm doing good. I could hear you loud and clear, so apparently
no
it's my
worries
end.
at all. We just appreciate you joining us. Sorry for the issues earlier, but like I said, this is a very fluid, and it's a live report on Facebook, so sometimes we have to work through these things. Not a big deal at all. You know, the whole Realtree family, we're all down to earth. We have a good time. We keep it real. So, you know, this is the type of things that you don't see behind the scenes of produced video. This is definitely not produced video.
when it's live, there's no way to hide
That's
anything,
right.
is there?
That's right. So we get put on the hot seat, but that's all right because we enjoy it. We wouldn't have it any other way. But we just appreciate you sticking with us. And but without further ado, tell me a little bit about who you are. You know, I know you. I've known you for quite some time, and most of our
Yeah.
viewers out there do. But for those who haven't followed you, just introduce yourself and explain your Realtree 365 inclusion.
Sure. Blair Goins from Northwest Alabama. My brother Bart and I, and then two other guys, started the show called The Rival a few years ago. We've done that for a few years and became, very in depth more. And so with the whole Realtree outdoors crew and things of that nature. So this year we're excited to jump on the Whitetail TV show through Realtree 365 and be a part of it and see if we can help build some content for that show. We're having a blast. We're having some good luck so far. I know Doug killed a big deer in Arkansas last night, or yesterday evening, I should say. So, and it should be probably in the next week or so. It'll be on the Whitetail TV show through obviously Realtree 365.
Good deal, absolutely, and congrats to you guys. You guys have had an exceptional season so far, and it's really just getting started. Heck, we're tomorrow's Halloween, and that's really the kickoff for the best action out there. So. You're in the Southeast, obviously. So tell us a little bit about, what the deer are doing down there where you are.
Well, to be real honest, a lot of the Southeast especially avid bow hunters seem to travel a lot. So I would say, right now's the time to go travel to the Midwest or, wherever your other big buck killing spots is. The deer here in the Southeast, I actually had a deer. So in Alabama, it came in October the 15th, a little bit later, but obviously we go into until February the 10th where I live. I had a deer pretty much pegged actually about 6 to 7 days before the season came in. And then the acorns really started dropping and we kind of lost, the deer. Where I live, it's a lot of pine country and hardwood timber country. So I don't love a lot of acorns falling because I think the deer get much harder to hunt. I'd rather have them on food plots, or obviously in the state of Alabama, it is legal to bait now as well. So I'd rather have them in front of a feeder or in my food plot where I can see them instead of just a 2,000 acre, hardwood timber country land, so to speak. So, but obviously right now, Bart and I are getting geared up to go back to, head back to the Midwest. I just got back from Kansas. I spent about 5 to 6 days out there. But, like I said, right here in my home, exactly where I live, I think the deer are pretty hard to hunt right now just because of the amount of acorns that are just literally bountiful right now. Chestnut oak acorns are something that fall pretty quickly. A lot of people call them mountain oak or chestnut oak acorns. They seem to fall pretty quickly towards the latter part of September, first part of October, and then the deer get on them pretty hard. But of course, by now you're having your white oaks to fall and things of that nature. But in my opinion, there's a bountiful amount of acorns, at least in the spots that I hunt, and it makes it kind of harder to pinpoint a deer and pattern a deer when there's just food everywhere.
Sure. Since you've been up in the Midwest and spending some time there, you've alluded to it and talked about it a little already. What's the current state of the rut, so to speak, up there in Kansas and other, surrounding states?
Yeah, so obviously, Bart and I both hunt in Brown County, Illinois a lot. I went out to Kansas the latter part of, I just got back actually late last night. I was out there for several days. And, I was so I'm a big guy. So first of all, I don't only hunt. I work for somebody else. I don't make totally my own schedule. I have to report for work like most hunters actually do. So what I try to do is plan, my trips to where I feel like I can kill a deer pretty quickly, and then get back. Because I obviously am hunting 5 or 6, states, but yet I only have, 3 to 4 weeks of vacation. So got to try to cover a lot and get a lot done in a short amount of time. So, but I say all that to say this: I was trying to get to Kansas and get back to hunt Illinois. I do get a statewide tag. Let me hook into some power here because it's trying to lose real quick. Okay. I do have a statewide tag, and then I also have a landowner's tag, so I actually get two bucks that I can kill in Illinois. So my plan was to get to Kansas, try to have some luck. But before I left, I'm a big guy about moon phases. I live and die by the moon, and everybody's got their own opinions of ways to hunt, and that's fine. I don't like a dark moon. And, you know, I've talked to some people and they have a lot of luck on dark moons. That's completely fine. I don't like a dark moon. I think, in my opinion, it's the hardest time to kill a deer. And we experienced that the whole time we were in Kansas. We were checking. I was hunting with an outfitter friend of mine named Kyle Lorson, Legends of Hope Outfitting, and running, you know, over a few days, we probably ran 35 to 45 different trail cameras. And what I found was what my theory was. There was a lot of buck movement between about 1 a.m. and about 3 to 4 a.m. And we hunted. Normally, I don't hunt a lot of mornings, you know, so we were hunting like the 24th through the 29th of October. So a lot of times I don't hunt a lot of mornings that early, you know, in the year, but obviously to try to maximize my time, I was doing that. And I had some deer pegged. I had some really good deer. I had one particular deer that was probably in the low to mid 70s. I had him on camera. The last 3 evenings that I hunted him, I had him on camera within an hour and a half after daylight of the food plot that I was hunting every day. And the last day that I hunted, so the day before that, I had him on camera about 25 minutes after daylight. The next day, I had a major cold front to push in. It did snow a little bit. The high that day was about 32, northeast wind, and I very much predicted that deer would be on his feet. But that was a scenario where I think the moon won out, and he was not on his feet before daylight. Kyle did check the camera, call me back today, and he has been back on camera, and he was actually back on the camera right on the food plot after we left it about an hour. So, you know, and I attribute all that to the moon. I think had we have had a full moon or a rising moon, we'd have had a lot more daylight activity. Again, we were seeing on camera, there was 15 to 20 different shooter bucks upon all his, you know, portion that we were looking at. The other thing was I was monitoring about 5 or 6 Spartan cameras on my personal property in Illinois. And so I added a lease to my piece this year. And so it's kind of new to me, but I went in, set it up, put food plots. I put scrape trees in front of my food plots. And of course, I'm running Spartans over them. And what I noticed about the 27th-ish of October was all of a sudden, I started having deer that I haven't seen. And obviously, like I said, it's a new lease, so I don't have previous years of inventory, right? So I started seeing, you know, new bucks to me. Some of them were 5, 6, 7-year-old bucks, in my opinion, that were pounding the scrape. And literally, the scrape that I started in the middle of a food plot went from about the size of maybe 2 laptop computers, you know, so, you know, somewhere maybe, you know, 30 inches, you know, by 30 inches to all of a sudden now it's probably, I was actually looking at it today compared to a deer's body, and it's probably more than the length of a deer, long ways. So you're probably looking at 3.5 feet or so. And then it's, you know, it's probably 2.5 feet, you know, across. So they have been pounding that scrape. Now, there was a major rain event that came in yesterday, and actually in that scrape, it's a puddle this evening, so it's actually underwater. So, and they didn't hit it this evening. Like I said, I've been monitoring those Spartan cameras like crazy. They didn't hit it this evening. They didn't hit it this morning, and they really didn't hit it much yesterday evening. There was a 3.5-year-old buck that came to it, but about 3 nights ago, right before all that rain event came, I had 4 shooters, all 10 points, to hit it in the same night. So. You know, a lot of times people ask, will multiple bucks hit a same scrape? Absolutely. If it's in an area where that's a, you know, kind of a signpost scraping area, so to speak. And again, that's in the middle of a backwoods attraction food plot, about 25 yards or 30 yards out from my box barn. So next week, this is my opinion again. So starting Saturday, the moon is going to start to wax, okay? So we're going to get into where it's building, okay? I love about 6 to 7 days before the moon gets full. I think your evening activity is peak. And if you look back to previous years, this is why. So if some of the guys that were hunting in the Midwest had some trouble seeing deer this past week, as I did, I'll tell you why. I think it was because of the moon phase. And in the previous years, we've had a moon that was building towards the latter weekend of October, and we've had a lot of success. I know the last 3 years, I think 2 or 3 years, Bart and I both killed a deer basically before November. And so, but this year you had a dark moon phase. Okay. So I know it was kind of a hard time to hunt, but the flip of the switch is, you're fixing to get the moon building, days before the peak rut. So sometimes when the deer might lock down between that, again, I'm speaking in that specific Midwest portion, maybe when they lock down between that 5th and 10th, it's just harder to see. Well, I'm kind of anticipating that you're going to have a lot more deer activity because the moon is on the rise, and I think you're going to see some good, really good evening hunts. And I'm looking very much forward to that. I'll just tell you straight up, I'm probably leaving out about again the 5th. So I hope I'm not too late, but I've got some family things I've got to do this weekend, so I've got to wait a few days before I can go again and work half of next week.
Absolutely.
At least.
And that's sometimes tough, juggling hunting and work, and we all have to do it. Some have more time off than others, but it's a real thing even for those who work in the outdoor industry. A lot of people think that those who work in the outdoor industry or part of the outdoor industry, they just hunt for a living. That's not true. I do this for Realtree and do other things, but at the same time, my job isn't to hunt. So that is an issue, but definitely for sure, that first 2 weeks of November is king in the Midwest, especially that November. And again, this is my opinion, but I really love that November 3rd, 4th, 5th to the 10th, just historically speaking. But yeah, it's some solid information for our our Midwest guys. Tactically speaking, we have a really good cold front that's going to be moving in, has already hit for some Midwest states. But for others, the eastern half, Ohio, Indiana, it's going to be transitioning, moving through probably tomorrow and Friday. And it's going to be solid, really, really good weather, really good temperatures for most of the northern half of the country for the next week to 10 days. What's your advice, tactically speaking, for our deer hunters who get out this weekend?
So absolutely, obviously the weather's the trump card in my opinion. Secondly, I think the moon. And so you're getting into a period where if you can hunt on the front side or on the back side of that front, and literally when it's, walk with a small umbrella in, and when it starts to stop raining, you need to be in that stand, especially if it's of the evening. I really think, this, again, my opinion, I really think the evening movement is fixing to really pop in a lot of places across the Midwest. Like I said, you're going to get that moon to start to build. Your evening movement is going to peak, and as you get more deer on their feet, even if there's some does that may not come in for another 10, 12, 15 days, you're going to get more activity, especially around your food plots and things of that nature of the evening. So by all means, when that front comes in, be hunting on the front side of that front and be hunting on the back side of that front if you can. It's just right around the corner that it's time to, maybe kick everything else aside and maybe focus on hunting, or trying to hunt at least for the next 10 to 15 days. Because what I never want to get into is where I'm so late that the deer are just locked down. If you hunt for several days and you're not seeing at least some does in areas that you normally see does, regardless of bucks, if you're not at least seeing does in areas that you normally see does, or if it cuts down to, 2 or 3 does and normally you see, 12 to 15 does, well, that's a good sign that those bucks are, those bucks and does are starting to lock down. And when the does start feeling it, my opinion is they don't flood those food plots or feeders or whatever you're hunting over like they normally would, because they know there's some changing going on. They want to be more isolated.
Absolutely. Great advice. And for most northern deer hunters, as I've said earlier, that peak breeding window, lockdown phase, so to speak, is usually for most states, it's going to be November 10th to 20th, with a peak around somewhere around the 14th, 15th.
That's right.
Excuse me. But, and that's why, it's such great advice from you. That November 5th to the 10th is probably the best 5 days. It's plus or minus, each year, a day or two. But yeah, that November 3rd, 4th, 5th to 8th, 9th, 10th is pretty much magical. And definitely with the weather that we're going to be having, aside from hunting the backside of this cold front that's moving through, that 4 to 5, 6 day window is going to be probably the best hunting of the year, as it always is.
It's going to get
Good
really
deal. Is there
good.
anything else you'd like to share with our listeners tonight?
No, the other thing is if you get out there and you're hunting and you're not seeing a lot, your area might be in a little bit of lockdown. So if you hunt for a little bit, and you say, man, I'd like to go back and work 2 or 3 days. Hey, go back and work 2 or 3 days. Normally when the deer are locked down, they're going to be locked down for, one buck will usually lock down for three days. So, don't be afraid either. If you're running cell cameras, great. If you're not, don't be afraid, especially if you can drive a truck to a lot of them because they're on a field edge or whatever. I typically don't run many cameras in woods in the Midwest. I like to hunt fringes, edges. I like to bring the deer out to me. My opinion is if you're going in the timber, well, you're kind of like a football game. You're kind of playing on their field, so to speak. It's a lot easier to fool them, in my opinion, to bring them out to you. So I say that to say this. If your cameras are on edges, which all of mine are, I don't think I have a single one in the timber, then by all means, check those cameras periodically and, drive your truck to them. Don't be afraid to check them in the middle part of the day because you can literally have a buck to show up. And if he showed up for 2 days in a row, there's a pretty good chance he's going to show up that third day and by all means be in there. If hang a stand if you need to and get on him.
Absolutely. Thanks. Where can everybody follow you at and follow your season?
Yeah, so Realtree 365, Whitetail TV, a brand new episode comes out every Wednesday, sometime throughout the course of the day. You can also follow a lot of us. They're on our social media apps. I'm Blair Goins, Joe Schultz, Doug Hampton, of course Tyler Jordan, and Bart Goins. All of us have our own. We try to keep you up to date live feeds just through our personal stuff. And then again, we're getting that footage, we're downloading it, getting it kicked over to Realtree, and they're trying their best to get it out, within a week or 10 days or so.
That's great, and it's all solid content. It's been some great stuff, some great stories being told already this season. It's only going to get better. Thanks for joining us, and we'll definitely have you on again sometime this season.
Josh, sounds good. Thank you, buddy.
Solid report from our good buddy Blair Goins. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to get any of our other reporters on tonight. They're having some technical issues. I'm not able to send them an invite. At this point, I'm just going to read their reports and share their reports with you guys. Jumping over to the Northeast, Josh Montgomery's report. He says we're knocking on the door of November and the time of year that we've all been waiting for. It's upon us. We've been talking about that a lot tonight. But he said the weather is looking good for the coming week. He says it's going to cooperate for the start of November with temperatures looking to drop through the weekend, which is set up for some really good deer movement. He said scrapes and rubs are popping up all over with bucks being more frequent at those scrapes, even toward, daylight hours. So that's good news. He said bucks are beginning to wander a little bit further outside their core areas as they search for that first estrus doe. And even bucks are showing up in new places, as we've seen and heard from other regions throughout the country already. He says he has several reports of hunters watching multiple bucks following a doe in several northeastern states, which could have been the first hot does for those areas. Again, even though that peak breeding range is November 10th to 20th with a peak day of the 15th for most northern states, it's not unheard of to see deer breed outside of that. In fact, it happens every year, but 90 to 95% of your does breed within that 10-day window. He says that reports will begin to be more frequent of bucks following does, chasing does, as we move into the first week of November. He said the warm weather is moving out, cold weather moving in. Should have deer up on their feet anyway, but pair that with the oncoming of the rut activity, and it should be some really good conditions. He said deer are still pretty consistent on food sources for now. Acorns are still really popular in most areas where they have them, but corn and beans are at the top of the list as well, where the acorns are not as plentiful. He checked in with Midwest Whitetail Pro staffer Garrett in South Central Pennsylvania. Garrett watched as one doe was chased across the pit cornfield with 4 bucks behind her and 2 of them being mature. That happened an hour before sunset there in South Central Pennsylvania. That's a surefire sign that that was the first estrus doe for that area. Whenever you have a bunch of bucks on the same doe in October, she's probably the first estrus doe to come in the heats. in that area. So that's good news for that region. And it's hard to take advantage of that. You just got to have to be there when it happens. It's hard to predict when that first estrus doe is going to enter estrus. It's usually going to be sometime within the last few days of October. Could be the first couple days of November. You never know exactly when it's going to happen, but you just got to be in the stand when it is happening. So good news for you South Central Pennsylvania deer hunters. Could be happening on multiple properties, numerous properties in the area. He said the deer activity was great before the warm-up, and Garrett expects that to continue as it cools down again through the end of the week. He said deer have cleaned up most of the white oaks in his area while red oaks are still falling. Corn has been hot, and Garrett took advantage of that to fill the freezer and tag a few does. He said mature bucks are beginning to increase daylight movement in his area as well. Moving northward, he spoke with Andrew Logan, who is the owner of True North Outfitters in Bangor, Maine. I think that's how you pronounce that. Andrew is starting to see bucks freshen up scrape lines with great movement throughout the past week. Bucks are beginning to test each other. Andrew witnessed a few bucks fighting in the last few days, which makes it a good time to do some of that light rattling and calling. It's that time of year for most northern states in basically the northern half of the country. He said deer are still eating apples and soft mast where it can still be found and hasn't been cleaned up yet. That's key because a lot of times deer will target soft mast over hard mast if it's available. So that's something to keep in mind if you have fruit trees on the properties that you hunt. He says he's also been seeing them browse heavily on beech nuts, and that can happen in areas where deer don't have as good of food sources. It's still a decent food source, but it's not as good as other options. So that might be a sign that the acorns wasn't quite as good in the locations where the deer are hitting those alternative mass crop sources. The area has experienced a bumper crop of the beech nuts this year, though, and Andrew said the area had 2 major rainstorms in the last few weeks that put a damper on things, but he expects it to get really good moving into the weekend and next week. The temperatures won't be getting outside of the high 40s, so that's good news. He also talked with Brian Kronk, who is a deer hunter up in northern New Jersey. Brian hunts in Sussex, Morris, and Hunterdon counties. Deer are still hitting acorns with most of the white oaks gone, but there's a lot of red oaks still available in that area, that part of New Jersey. He is seeing a lot of deer starting to show up. New bucks are showing up, deer that he hasn't seen before, and that's good news for deer hunters who have not had a lot of deer on camera just yet. He said there's a lot of new rubs and scrapes showing up daily. And he also said this past week did slow a bit with the warm weather, as is the case and has been the case for all of our northeast, southeast, and Midwest states. But he says things are really going to get better in the Northeast as we move into the weekend, even there in New Jersey. He said with some of the first good signs of the rut showing up in the last couple of days, the best is still yet to come. 95% of the does have yet to be bred. The peak chasing, even for the Northeast, is going to be somewhere around that November 2nd, 3rd, 4th or about the November 10th. And any time in that window, plus or minus a day or two, is generally the best deer hunting each year. You don't want to hunt that lockdown phase. You want to be out there because you never know when a deer is going to break loose, whenever a buck's going to be back on his feet. As Blair said earlier, a lot of times deer spend 2 days with a deer. So whenever a buck finds a doe in estrus, she's usually smells right but won't breed for about 24 hours. And then she's in estrus and will basically stand for a buck to breed her for about 24 hours after that. So depending on when that buck finds that doe, he could be there for 24 hours. He could be there for 36 hours, 48 hours, or longer. You just never know exactly how it's going to work out. But even if you're hunting during that lockdown phase, which isn't as good as that November 1st to 10th time frame, you still want to be out there and give it a shot. You never know what could happen. Moving over to the Midwest report before we run out of time here. Tyler says that he, as we usher into the month of November, the whitetail rut is primed to burst into action. There in Michigan, where he is, young bucks are on the move working themselves into a frenzy. They're bumping and chasing does quite a bit. The action is primarily taking place around food sources where deer are still on feeding patterns. Older age class bucks have started to become more active with some movement happening during daylight hours. This should really increase over the next week or two. In Wisconsin, Steve Gullickson of Central Wisconsin reported a big increase in action over the past week. Scraping activity in his areas have really picked up, and they're kind of at their peak now. Mature bucks are moving in daylight more each day and are starting to pay more attention to the does in that area. Younger bucks are, have already been harassing and chasing does quite a bit, but there's no real reports of breeding taking place yet, which is as to be expected. He also noted that the bucks are becoming more and more daylight active. Deer activity as a whole has been very good in Wisconsin, thanks in part to below average temperatures there. They have not been affected by the recent warm up quite as much as other states throughout the country. In Nebraska, he spoke with Melvin Oldacker of Oldacker Outfitting in northwestern Nebraska, who reported solid overall deer movement. He also says that the deer are fighting and sparring much more frequently now and has really ramped up in the past week or so. Bucks are starting to chase does there as well. In South Dakota, Mike Stroff of Savage Outdoors reports that bucks are starting to move more during daylight in his areas, and over the past week or so, scraping has really ramped up. He also noted that 2- and 3-year-old deer are starting to bump and chase does. The big mature bucks haven't really started yet. Finally, in Kansas, he spoke with his friend Hayden Henderson with Tamarack Outfitters, who reported a major uptick in activity in the recent days. He says it's common to see an increase in buck activity around Halloween, but thanks to a significant cold front that recently set in, it was like someone flipped the switch. But things have really been good there for the last few days, and they're only going to get better. For nearly all of the Midwest region, peak breeding is going to occur within probably 2 weeks. But the best time to hunt the rut is going to be the next 7 to 10 days. So keep that in mind as you take those vacation days if you haven't taken or scheduled them already. That's going to conclude our report for tonight. We apologize for our technical issues and difficulties that we had this evening. That's not typically the case. We generally have these things go off without a hitch, but we sometimes have some issues technically with our technical issues here because it's Facebook Live, and Facebook Live can sometimes be a little jinky. But we have had a good report nonetheless, a lot of really good information from numerous guests. We were still able to have Patrick Matine on to give the Northwest Southwest reports, and luckily we were able to get Mr. Blair Goins on with us, and he talks Southeast and Midwest. So a lot of good stuff from everyone who was able to join us tonight. Solid report, solid action, and like I said, and like they said, the next 7 to 10 days for most places, unless you're in the deep south, the next 7 to 10 days are going to be really good. The best time, in fact, to chase a white-tailed deer if you like the rut and you like big bucks. So that said, we're going to jump off. We're going to touch base again with you next Wednesday night. I expect things to be a little better come next Wednesday. Even though we'll be kind of past a little bit of that peak chasing activity, there'll still be some yet to come. It's definitely not going to be over with by next week. In fact, it may even be better. And if I had to guess, I'll say next week. I'm just going to throw it all out there on the line. I'm going to predict that next Wednesday is going to be even better and quite a bit better than it was this week. So make sure you join us next Wednesday night. We'll start right here at 7 p.m. Central Time. And hopefully we don't have the technical issues that we had tonight. But hey, sometimes it happens and we work through them. So good luck this weekend. Stay safe out there in the deer woods. And we hope you tag a good one. See you next Wednesday night.